The sun hung low over the dusty horizon, as Sarah Matthews clutched her swollen belly, feeling the weight of her 7-month pregnancy in every step along the rocky path. The year was 1878, and the unforgiving New Mexico territory was no place for a woman in her condition to be wandering alone, but desperation had driven her here, to the outskirts of Albuquerque, where hope seemed as scarce as rainfall. Sarah had been gathering herbs along the creek bed when she heard a low, menacing growl that sent shivers racing up her spine. Turning slowly, her breath caught in her throat at the sight of a mangy wild dog, its ribs visible beneath matted fur, eyes glinting with hunger and desperation that matched her own. "Nice doggy," she whispered, one hand protectively covering her belly as she took a careful step backward. The animal tensed, hackles rising along its spine. Sarah's foot slipped on loose gravel and she stumbled slightly. It was all the provocation the beast needed. With a snarl that seemed to tear through the still afternoon air, the wild dog lunged at her, jaws snapping. A sharp crack split the silence. The dog froze mid-leap, then collapsed in a heap mere feet from where Sarah stood trembling. "Back up slow, I've got the shot," came a steady male voice from behind her, "just in case there are more of them." Sarah obeyed, moving carefully until she was standing beside her unlikely savior, a tall man with sun-weathered skin. His Stetson pulled low over piercing blue eyes. A rifle rested comfortably in his calloused hands. "Noah Martinez," he introduced himself, his gaze never leaving the surrounding brush. "Didn't expect to find a lady in your condition out here all alone." Sarah placed a hand on her racing heart. "Sarah Matthews, and I wasn't planning on encountering wild dogs today either." Her voice caught as delayed shock set in. Thank you," Noah nodded once, finally turning to look at her properly. Something in his expression softened at the sight of her pale face. "Madam, you look about ready to faint. My ranch is just over that rise. Let me take you there to rest a spell before heading back to town." As Sarah looked into the face of the man who had just saved her life and the life of her unborn child, she had no idea that this chance encounter would change everything. That this quiet cowboy with careful aim would soon become her entire world. Noah Martinez had never considered himself a hero. At 32, he'd spent the better part of his life trying to build something lasting in this harsh territory, something he could be proud of. His small ranch outside Albuquerque was modest but growing. What it lacked, he'd come to realize over long, solitary nights, was a family to share it with. As he helped the pregnant woman onto his horse, he was struck by how light she felt despite her condition, as if the weight she carried was more than just the child. Her simple calico dress had seen better days, and he noticed the absence of a wedding band on her finger, an observation he kept to himself. "How far along are you?" he asked as they rode double, his arms creating a protective cage around her as he held the reins. 7 months, give or take," Sarah answered, her voice steadier now. "Little one's been kicking up a storm lately." Noah nodded, though she couldn't see him. "My sister had 4 young uns, said the active ones make for strong babies." The journey to Noah's ranch passed in comfortable silence, Sarah gradually relaxing against him as the adrenaline of the attack subsided. His cabin came into view, sturdy and well-built, with a small corral to one side where 3 horses grazed contentedly. "It's not much," Noah said as he helped her down, suddenly self-conscious of his bachelor accommodations. "It's lovely," Sarah replied sincerely, taking in the neat homestead. "You've built all this yourself," pride flickered across Noah's features. "Every nail and board, been here 5 years now." He guided her toward the porch. "Come on in and rest. I'll fix you something to eat before taking you back to town." Inside, the cabin was simple but meticulously kept. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, a rocking chair positioned nearby. The kitchen area held a cast iron stove and a solid wooden table with 2 chairs. Through an open door, Sarah glimpsed a bedroom with a neatly made bed. "Please sit," Noah gestured to the rocking chair. "Water's already hot for coffee, and I've got some stew from yesterday." Sarah lowered herself gratefully into the chair, her hand automatically moving to soothe the baby who had started kicking again. "I don't want to impose." "No imposition," Noah replied, already moving efficiently around the kitchen. "Don't get many visitors out here." He paused, regarding her curiously. "Though I have to wonder what brings a woman in your condition out to these parts alone. The Matthews place is a good 5 miles to town." Sarah's expression clouded. "I'm not. I don't live at the Matthews place anymore." Noah busied himself with the stew, sensing her discomfort. "None of my business, madam, just concerned is all." "No, it's all right," Sarah said softly. "My husband Thomas died 3 months ago, influenza." Her fingers twisted the fabric of her dress. "His family. They didn't approve of me from the beginning. Said I trapped him into marriage. When he passed, they made it clear there was no place for me or my child at their home." Noah set a steaming bowl before her, his expression unreadable. "So where have you been staying?" "Mrs. Wilkinson took me in." "She runs the boarding house in town," Sarah explained, accepting the food gratefully. "I've been helping with laundry and cooking in exchange for room and board, but—" She hesitated. "It's getting harder as the baby grows. I was gathering herbs today to sell to the apothecary for extra money." Noah sat across from her, his own bowl untouched. Dangerous country to be wandering alone. "I'm learning that," Sarah agreed with a weak smile. "Though I never expected a wild dog. Been a dry season. They're coming closer to settlements looking for food." Noah finally took a bite of his stew. "This territory isn't kind to those without protection, Mrs. Matthews." Sarah's spine straightened slightly. "I'm learning to protect myself." A ghost of a smile crossed Noah's features. "I don't doubt your determination, madam, but sometimes even the strongest folks need help." As they ate, Noah found himself studying his unexpected guest. Despite her evident exhaustion and the weight of her circumstance, there was a quiet dignity in her bearing. Her chestnut hair was neatly pinned back, revealing delicate features and expressive brown eyes that held both sorrow and resolve. "Have you thought about what you'll do after the baby comes?" he asked, refilling her water cup. Sarah set down her spoon, her expression carefully composed. "I'll manage. Mrs. Wilkinson says I can stay on, and once the baby is old enough, I can find more regular work." Noah hesitated, then said, "Territory's growing. I hear the mercantile in town is looking for help." "Mr. Peterson made it clear he doesn't hire unwed mothers," Sarah replied, a flash of bitterness coloring her words. "Even widows with no family raise eyebrows in Albuquerque." The unfairness of her situation stirred something protective in Noah. He'd seen how quickly judgment could fall in frontier towns, how a woman alone faced scrutiny that men never encountered. "It's getting late," he observed, noting the deepening shadows outside. "I should get you back to town before dark." Sarah nodded, rising carefully from her chair. "Thank you for the meal, and for saving my life earlier." "Just happened to be in the right place," Noah demurred. As he helped her onto his horse again, their hands brushed, and Noah was struck by how soft her skin felt despite the calluses of recent labor. For a moment, neither moved, a strange current passing between them. Noah cleared his throat and mounted behind her. The ride to town was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts as the setting sun painted the desert landscape in fiery hues. As they approached the outskirts of Albuquerque, Sarah broke the silence. I've been thinking of naming the baby Elizabeth if it's a girl, after my mother. That's a fine name, Noah replied. And if it's a boy? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Thomas, I suppose. Though his family might take offense at that too. A child should have his father's name if that's what you wish, Noah said firmly. No one has the right to deny you that. When they reached the boarding house, a modest two-story building with peeling white paint, Mrs. Wilkinson was sweeping the front porch. The older woman's eyebrows shot up at the sight of Sarah returning with a man. "Sarah Matthews, I was about to send the sheriff looking for you," she exclaimed, setting her broom aside. "I'm sorry to worry you, Mrs. Wilkinson," Sarah apologized as Noah helped her dismount. "I had a bit of trouble while gathering herbs." Noah tipped his hat to the landlady. "Noah Martinez, madam. Found Mrs. Matthews having some trouble with a wild dog out by the creek. Thought it best to see her safely home." Mrs. Wilkinson's expression softened with concern. "Goodness, child, are you hurt?" "No, thanks to Mr. Martinez," Sarah assured her. She turned to Noah, genuine gratitude in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." Noah shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "No need for thanks, madam. Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone," Sarah contradicted softly. Their eyes held for a moment longer than was proper, before Noah cleared his throat and remounted his horse. "You take care now, Mrs. Matthews. Maybe stay closer to town for your herb gathering." Sarah nodded, one hand resting on her belly. "I will." As Noah rode away, he found himself glancing back over his shoulder at the woman standing in the fading light, her figure silhouetted against the boarding house porch. Something about her situation nagged at him, a sense of injustice he couldn't quite shake. He hadn't planned on returning to town so soon, but 3 days later found him tying his horse outside the general store in Albuquerque. He told himself he was just picking up supplies he needed anyway: flour, coffee, ammunition. But even as he made his purchases, his eyes kept drifting toward the boarding house down the street. "Heard you rescued the Matthews widow," the shopkeeper, Peterson, remarked as he tallied Noah's items. "Folks were talking about it at church on Sunday." Noah kept his expression neutral. "Just happened to be passing by." Peterson leaned forward conspiratorially. "Shame about her situation. Pretty young thing like that. But you know what they say about women who trap men into marriage." Noah's jaw tightened. "Don't recall asking what they say, Peterson." The shopkeeper straightened, clearing his throat. "Course not. That'll be $3.45. After paying, Noah found himself walking toward the boarding house, his steps slowing as he approached. What exactly was he doing? He had no reason to check on Sarah Matthews. She wasn't his responsibility. Yet here he was, knocking on the door. Mrs. Wilkinson answered, surprise evident on her round face. "Mr. Martinez, isn't it? What brings you to town?" "I was just—" Noah fumbled, hat in hand. "I wanted to see if Mrs. Matthews was doing all right after her scare." Understanding dawned in the older woman's eyes. "That's mighty thoughtful. She's around back hanging laundry. Poor dear insists on earning her keep despite my telling her to rest." Noah followed the path around the house to find Sarah stretching to hang sheets on a clothesline, her pregnant belly making the task awkward. Without a word, he stepped forward and took the damp sheet from her hands, easily clipping it to the line. Sarah startled, then broke into a smile when she recognized him. "Mr. Martinez, what brings you to town?" "Supplies," he answered, taking another sheet from the basket. "And I thought I'd check on you." "That's very kind." Sarah brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, leaving a damp mark. "As you can see, we're both fine." She patted her belly affectionately. Noah nodded, continuing to help with the laundry. "Glad to hear it." They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Sarah asked, "How are things at your ranch?" "Same as always." Cattle need tending, fences need mending. He glanced at her. Less exciting than being attacked by wild dogs. A laugh escaped her, genuine and warm, and Noah found himself smiling in response. It felt good to make her laugh. "I never properly thanked you," Sarah said as they hung the last of the laundry. "You saved 2 lives that day." Noah's expression grew serious. "No need for thanks, but I've been thinking about your situation, Mrs. Matthews." Sarah's smile faded slightly. "Oh, I need help around the ranch," he said, the words coming out more abruptly than he'd intended. "Cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. It would come with room and board, of course, and pay. Not much, but—" He trailed off, suddenly aware of how forward his proposition might sound. Sarah studied him, her expression unreadable. "Are you offering me a job, Mr. Martinez?" "Yes," he confirmed, relieved she understood. "Until the baby comes, at least. You'd have your own room, and it might be easier than trying to keep up with Mrs. Wilkinson's chores in your condition." "I see." Sarah looked down at her hands, considering. "That's very generous, but it wouldn't be charity," Noah interrupted, sensing her hesitation. "I genuinely need the help. Been living like a bachelor too long, and it shows." He attempted a smile. "Besides, it's safer out there than wandering alone gathering herbs." Sarah's lips quirked. "That's true enough." She looked back toward the boarding house, her expression thoughtful. "May I have some time to consider it?" "Of course." Noah placed his hat back on his head. "I'll be in town again next week. No rush to decide." As he rode home that evening, Noah questioned his impulsive offer. His small ranch was remote, and while he wasn't lying about needing help, bringing a pregnant woman, a virtual stranger, into his home was unconventional to say the least. People would talk. Yet every time he pictured Sarah struggling alone with her baby, facing judgment and hardship in a town that had already decided her worth, his resolve strengthened. He had the means to help, and something about her quiet dignity called to him. To his surprise, he didn't have to wait until the following week for her answer. 2 days later, he spotted a wagon approaching his property, driven by an older man he recognized as the boarding house's handyman. Beside him sat Sarah, one hand shielding her eyes against the sun as she surveyed the landscape. Noah set down his tools and walked out to meet them, his heart inexplicably racing. "Mrs. Matthews," he greeted, helping her down from the wagon. "I wasn't expecting you so soon." Sarah adjusted her small carpet bag, looking slightly uncertain now that she was here. "Mrs. Wilkinson convinced me not to wait. She says a pregnant woman needs fresh air and space to roam." Her eyes met his. "If your offer still stands." "It does," Noah assured her, suddenly aware of how unkempt he must look after a morning of ranch work. The handyman unloaded a small trunk. "Mrs. Wilkinson sent along some things she thought might be useful. Said to tell you she expects you both for Sunday dinner sometime." After the man departed, an awkward silence fell between Noah and Sarah as they stood in the yard, the reality of their arrangement suddenly taking shape. "Let me show you to your room," Noah said finally, picking up her trunk. "It's not much, but it's clean." He led her inside, where he'd spent the past 2 days cleaning more thoroughly than he had since moving in. He'd cleared out the small second bedroom, previously used for storage, and set up a narrow bed with fresh linens. "This is lovely," Sarah said, surveying the simple space. "Much more private than I had at the boarding house." Noah set down her trunk. "Bathroom's outside, I'm afraid, and the water pump. But there's a wash basin here, and I keep the stove going most days." Sarah nodded, taking it all in. "When would you like me to start my duties?" "No rush," Noah replied. "Get settled first. Rest if you need to." But Sarah shook her head, already rolling up her sleeves. "I'd rather keep busy. Show me around the kitchen, Over the next week, Noah's solitary existence transformed. He'd never realized how empty his home had been until Sarah filled it with small touches wildflowers in a jar on the table, the smell of fresh bread baking, humming as she worked. Their initial awkwardness gradually gave way to a comfortable routine. Noah found himself lingering over meals, drawn into conversation with a woman who, despite her hardships, maintained a hopeful view of the world. Sarah, in turn, discovered that beneath Noah's reserved exterior was a thoughtful man with unexpected depths. "How did you come to ranching?" she asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson. Noah considered the question, leaning back in his chair. "My father was a cattleman up in Colorado, taught me everything I know. When he passed, I decided to start fresh somewhere new." He looked out over his modest spread. New Mexico territory seemed like a place a man could build something of his own. "You've done well," Sarah observed. "This land feels peaceful." Noah nodded. "What about you, before Albuquerque?" Sarah's hand drifted to her belly, a gesture he'd come to recognize as both protective and comforting. "I grew up in Missouri. My father was a school teacher, but he died when I was 16. Mother and I managed for a while, but when she passed 2 years later, there wasn't much keeping me there. So you came west." "Thomas, my husband, was passing through our town. He worked for the railroad company," Sarah continued. "He was charming, talked about the opportunities out west. We married quickly and headed to Albuquerque." A shadow crossed her face. "His family thought it was too quickly." "They were right, in a way. We barely knew each other." "Was he good to you?" Noah asked quietly. Sarah considered this. "He wasn't unkind, just restless, always looking toward the next opportunity." She sighed. "We'd been here 8 months when the influenza took him. I never even had the chance to tell him about the baby." Noah's hand moved unconsciously toward hers before he caught himself, letting it rest on the arm of his chair instead. "I'm sorry." "So am I," Sarah replied softly. "Not just for Thomas, but for this little one who'll never know their father." "A child with a mother like you won't lack for love," Noah said, the words emerging before he could consider them. Sarah looked at him, surprise and something warmer in her expression. "Thank you for saying that." Their eyes held for a moment before Noah cleared his throat and stood. "Getting late. I should check on the horses before turning in." As days turned to weeks, Noah found himself watching Sarah when she wasn't looking, noticing the graceful way she moved despite her growing belly, the determined set of her jaw when tackling a difficult task, the softness in her eyes when she spoke of her coming child. He told himself his interest was merely concern for his employee, but in quiet moments of honesty, he acknowledged it was becoming something more. One afternoon, as Noah returned from mending fences on the far side of his property, he was alarmed to find Sarah sitting on the porch steps, her face pale and drawn. "What's wrong?" he asked, dismounting quickly and hurrying to her side. "Just some pains," Sarah assured him, though her hands gripped the edge of the step tightly. "The doctor in town said it might happen, practice contractions, he called them. Nothing to worry about." Noah wasn't convinced. "How long have you been sitting here?" "Not long," Sarah answered, wincing as another pain came. "I was hanging laundry when they started." Without hesitation, Noah scooped her into his arms, ignoring her protests. "I'm taking you to your bed to rest." "Noah, really, I'm fine," Sarah insisted, though she didn't struggle as he carried her inside. "Humor me," he replied, carefully depositing her on her bed. It was the first time he'd called her by her given name, a fact neither of them acknowledged. "What can I get you? Water? Tea?" Sarah's expression softened at his concern. "Water would be nice. And maybe sit with me until it passes." Noah brought her water, then awkwardly perched on the edge of a small chair beside her bed. They sat in silence for a while, Sarah occasionally tensing as a contraction came, Noah fighting the urge to reach for her hand. "Tell me about your family," Sarah said eventually, clearly seeking distraction from her discomfort. Noah hesitated. "Not much to tell. Father died, as I mentioned. Mother remarried and moved back east. I've got a sister in Denver with her family. You must miss them." "Sometimes," Noah admitted, "though I've always been comfortable with solitude." He glanced around the small room. "Until recently." Sarah's gaze met his, a question in her eyes. "Having someone underfoot must be an adjustment." "A good one," Noah replied simply. The air between them seemed to change, charged with unspoken feelings. Noah found himself studying the curve of Sarah's cheek, the way her hair escaped its pins to curl softly around her face. "The pains are easing," Sarah said softly, breaking the moment. "Thank you for sitting with me." Noah cleared his throat. "Of course, but you should rest for the remainder of the day. I can manage dinner." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Can you now?" A smile tugged at his lips. "I survived on my own cooking for years before you arrived." Survived being the operative word, Sarah teased, then grew serious. "Noah, I've been meaning to ask, what happens after the baby comes?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Noah had been avoiding thinking about it himself. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need," he said carefully. "Having you here has been good." "For the cooking and cleaning," Sarah added, her expression guarded. Noah met her gaze directly. "For more than that." The admission, small as it was, shifted something between them. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, and Noah fought the urge to take back the words, to retreat to safer ground. "I should let you rest," he said, rising from the chair. At the doorway, he paused. "Sarah, I meant what I said." After he left, Sarah lay back against her pillows, one hand resting on her belly where the baby had begun to kick again, as if sensing the tumult of its mother's emotions. In the short time she'd been at the ranch, something had changed in her. The crushing weight of uncertainty had lightened, replaced by a tentative hope she barely dared to name. Noah Martinez was unlike any man she'd known, quiet but not cold, strong but gentle. She'd seen the way he cared for his animals, firm but kind. The way he listened when she spoke, as if her thoughts mattered. The way his eyes followed her when he thought she wouldn't notice. Sarah closed her eyes, allowing herself to imagine, just for a moment, a life here beyond her employment. A life where she and her child belonged. Where Noah's presence was a constant. It was a dangerous daydream, one that could lead to heartache if she indulged it too much. Yet as she drifted towards sleep, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if Noah was having similar thoughts. The following morning, Sarah awoke feeling refreshed, the false labor pains completely gone. She found Noah already outside, chopping wood despite the early hour. She watched him through the window for a moment, admiring the strength in his movements before setting about making breakfast. They ate together as usual, though a new awareness hummed between them, making ordinary conversation feel charged with deeper meaning. "I thought I might ride into town today for supplies," Noah said as he finished his coffee. "Is there anything you need?" Sarah considered. "Some more yarn would be nice. I'm knitting a blanket for the baby." Noah nodded. "Any particular color?" "Yellow," Sarah replied with a smile. "It seems cheerful for a baby, don't you think?" "I do." Noah stood, gathering his hat and coat. "I shouldn't be gone more than a few hours." As he reached the door, Sarah called after him. "Noah," he turned, eyebrows raised in question. "Be careful," she said simply. A smile touched his lips. "Always am." After he departed, Sarah busied herself with household chores, humming as she worked. The baby was active today, kicking and shifting as if trying to dance along with her mother's songs. Sarah was talking softly to her belly, telling the baby about the birds outside the window, when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Noah was back sooner than expected. Wiping her hands on her apron, Sarah went to the door only to find not Noah, but 3 riders approaching the house. A knot of apprehension formed in her stomach as she recognized the lead rider, James Matthews, her late husband's older brother. Sarah stepped onto the porch, one hand instinctively moving to protect her belly. "James, what brings you out this way?" James Matthews was a tall man with cold eyes and a perpetual frown. He dismounted, looking around with obvious disdain. "So this is where you've been hiding." His gaze settled on her swollen belly. "Playing house with a rancher now, Sarah. Didn't take long to replace my brother." Heat flooded Sarah's face. "It's not what you think. I work for Mr. Martinez," James snorted. "Is that what they're calling it these days?" "You should leave," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Mr. Martinez will be back soon." "Actually, we saw your protector headed to town," one of the other riders remarked with a smirk. "Figured it was a good time for a family visit." Sarah recognized him as Thomas's cousin, Peter. The third rider she didn't know, but his leering gaze made her skin crawl. "What do you want, James?" Sarah demanded, standing her ground despite her growing unease. James climbed the porch steps, forcing Sarah to back up toward the door. "That child you're carrying is a Matthews. My parents have decided it should be raised properly with family." Cold fear gripped Sarah's heart. "This is my child." "A child needs a proper name, proper upbringing," James continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "You'll come back to town with us now. After the birth, arrangements will be made." "What arrangements?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. "The child will stay with my parents. You'll be free to go wherever you please." James's tone made it clear he cared nothing for her fate. Sarah's hand tightened on the doorframe behind her. "I will never give up my baby." "Now get off this property." James's expression hardened. "Don't be difficult, Sarah. You're in no position to refuse. A woman alone, living in sin with a rancher, what judge would side with you over respectable grandparents?" "I am not living in sin with anyone," Sarah insisted. "And Thomas would never have wanted his child taken from me." "Thomas isn't here to want anything," James said coldly. "Peter, get her things." Peter dismounted and started toward the house, but Sarah blocked the doorway. "Don't you dare enter this home. You have no right." "Move aside," Peter growled, reaching for her arm. "The lady asked you to leave," came a new voice, hard as steel. All heads turned to see Noah at the edge of the yard, his rifle pointed steadily at the group on the porch. He must have circled back from a different direction, approaching quietly enough that they hadn't heard him. "This is family business," James said, squaring his shoulders. "Nothing to do with you, Martinez." "You're on my property, threatening a woman under my protection," Noah replied, his aim never wavering. "That makes it my business." "Your protection," James sneered. "Is that what you call taking advantage of a widow?" Noah's expression remained impassive, but his eyes glinted dangerously. "The only ones I see taking advantage are 3 men intimidating a pregnant woman." He cocked the rifle with a decisive click. "Step away from her. Now." Peter and the third rider exchanged nervous glances, but James stood his ground. "You can't watch her every minute of every day, Martinez. And when that baby comes, the court will side with us." "Maybe," Noah acknowledged. "But right now, I'm the one holding the rifle, so I suggest you get on your horses and ride out while you still can." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Peter stepped back. "Come on, James. We can settle this another way." James's jaw worked angrily, but he finally nodded. "This isn't over, Sarah," he warned as he descended the steps. "That child belongs with the Matthews family." "This child belongs with its mother," Sarah retorted, finding her courage in Noah's steady presence. The three men mounted their horses, James fixing Noah with a venomous glare. "You've made an enemy today." "Wouldn't be the first time," Noah replied evenly. "Now go." Only when the riders had disappeared from sight did Noah lower his rifle and hurry to the porch. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" Sarah shook her head, though she was trembling. "No, just scared me. How did you know to come back?" "I had a feeling," Noah admitted, guiding her inside. "Saw their tracks heading this way when I was about a mile out and circled back." He set his rifle aside and knelt before her as she sank into a chair. "Sarah, what they were saying about taking your baby," tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "They've been threatening it since Thomas died. His parents never accepted me, but they want their grandchild. James is a lawyer. He says they can petition the court." Noah's expression darkened. "On what grounds?" "Moral unfitness, they'll claim," Sarah said bitterly. "A widow with no family, no means of support. And now they'll add living unchaperoned with a man to their accusations." Noah ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "There has to be a way to stop them." "Short of leaving the territory, I don't see how," Sarah admitted, wiping at her tears. "And I can't travel now, not this close to my time." Noah was quiet for a long moment, his thoughts racing. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "There is one solution." Sarah looked at him questioningly. "Marriage," Noah said simply. Sarah's breath caught. "What?" "If you were married, with a husband to provide for you and the child, they'd have no grounds for their petition," Noah explained, his eyes meeting hers steadily. "I'm offering to marry you, Sarah, to protect you both." The room seemed to still around them as the magnitude of his proposal sank in. Sarah searched his face, looking for signs of reluctance or pity. "Noah, I can't ask that of you," she finally said. "Marriage is. It's not something to enter into just to solve a problem." "Is that all you think this would be?" Noah asked softly. "A solution to a problem?" Sarah's heart raced. "What else would it be?" Noah took her hands in his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "These past weeks with you here, they've been the best of my life. I was existing before, just moving through my days. Now I wake up looking forward to seeing you, to hearing your voice." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "I'm not offering out of duty or pity, Sarah. I'm offering because the thought of you and your child leaving tears something apart inside me." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. "Noah, I know it's sudden," he continued. "And I know you're still grieving Thomas. I don't expect you to love me right away, but I hope, that you could in time." The raw honesty in his voice undid her completely. "You love me." Noah's eyes never left hers. "I do, both of you." His hand gently touched her belly, where the baby kicked as if in response. Sarah covered his hand with her own. "I don't need time, Noah. These past weeks have changed me too. I've found myself looking for you whenever you're gone, missing you even when you're just out checking the fences." She took a shaky breath. "Yes, I'll marry you, not just for protection, but because I want to build a life with you." The smile that broke across Noah's face transformed him, lighting his eyes with a joy Sarah had never seen there before. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that held both tenderness and promise. When they parted, Noah rested his forehead against hers. "We'll ride into town tomorrow, find the preacher. The sooner we're married, the better." Sarah nodded, then let out a soft laugh. "This isn't how I imagined a proposal." Noah smiled. "I'll make it up to you with a lifetime of better days." They were married 2 days later in the small church in Albuquerque, with Mrs. Wilkinson and a few of Noah's ranching neighbors as witnesses. Sarah wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Wilkinson had insisted on altering to accommodate her belly, and Noah had purchased a new shirt for the occasion. The ceremony was brief but sincere. both bride and groom speaking their vows with quiet conviction. Word traveled quickly in the small community. By the time they emerged from the church, a small crowd had gathered, curious about the hasty marriage. Among them, standing apart with thunderous expressions, were James Matthews and his parents. Noah felt Sarah tense beside him and placed a protective arm around her shoulders. "Ignore them," he murmured. "They can't touch you now, Martinez," James called, stepping forward. "This changes nothing about our claim." Noah turned to face him, his expression calm but resolute. "Actually, it changes everything, Matthews. Sarah is my wife now. Her child will have my name and my protection." Thomas's father, a stern-faced man with iron-gray hair, joined his son. "That child is Thomas's legacy, our blood. And it will know its heritage," Sarah spoke up, her voice steady. "But this baby will be raised by its mother, and the man who has chosen to be its father in every way that matters." The elder Matthews looked as if he wanted to argue further, but his wife laid a restraining hand on his arm. "George, not here," she said, her eyes cold as they assessed Sarah. "There are other ways." Mrs. Wilkinson stepped forward, positioning herself between the Matthews family and the newlyweds. "I think you folks should move along now. This is a day of celebration." With a final glare, the Matthews family retreated, but their presence had cast a shadow over what should have been a joyous occasion. Noah squeezed Sarah's hand. "Don't let them spoil this day," he said softly. "They're just words." Sarah nodded, forcing a smile. "You're right. This is our beginning." They accepted congratulations from the townspeople, some sincere, others tinged with speculation about the rushed nature of the union. Sarah held her head high through it all, her hand firmly in Noah's. Later, as they rode back to the ranch, their home now, truly shared, Sarah found her spirits lifting with each mile that separated them from town and the Matthews family. "You think they'll really try something else?" she asked as the ranch house came into view. Noah considered this. "They might. But we'll face it together." He helped her down from the wagon. "And in the meantime, we have a life to build." That night, as Sarah prepared for bed in what was now their shared room, nervous anticipation fluttered in her chest. Noah had been nothing but respectful, making it clear he expected nothing from her until she was ready. Still, this was their wedding night. When she emerged from behind the changing screen in her nightgown, Noah was sitting on the edge of the bed, having removed his boots and shirt. He looked up at her approach, his eyes softening. "You're beautiful," he said simply. Sarah blushed, suddenly shy despite the weeks they'd spent in each other's company. "I'm as big as a house." Noah stood, crossing to her and taking her hands. "You're carrying life." "There's nothing more beautiful than that." Sarah's heart swelled with emotion. This man, who had no obligation to her or her child, had chosen them both freely and completely. "Noah, I want you to know. I may not have planned this, but I don't regret it for a moment." Noah's thumb traced her cheekbone. "Neither do I." He hesitated, then asked, "May I kiss my wife good night?" Sarah's answer was to rise on her toes and press her lips to his. What began as gentle soon deepened, years of loneliness in both of them giving way to newfound connection. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "Sarah," Noah murmured, his voice rough with emotion, "I'll wait as long as you need. There's no rush." Sarah touched his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I don't want to wait," she whispered. "I want to be your wife in every way." The last uncertainty between them dissolved as Noah drew her into his arms, their bodies finding each other with tender discovery. Later, as they lay entwined, Sarah's head resting on Noah's chest, she felt a completeness she'd never known before. "What are you thinking?" Noah asked, his fingers gently combing through her unbound hair. Sarah smiled against his skin. That sometimes the most unexpected turns in life lead exactly where we're meant to be. Noah pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Welcome home, Mrs. Martinez. The weeks that followed were a time of adjustment and deepening bonds. Noah threw himself into preparations for the baby's arrival, building a cradle with his own hands and reinforcing the house against the coming winter. Sarah watched him work with growing affection, seeing in his careful preparations the depth of his commitment to their unusual family. In private moments, their initial hesitancy gave way to genuine passion, both discovering in the other a partner who understood their needs without words. Sarah found herself falling more deeply in love with Noah with each passing day, with his quiet strength, his unexpected tenderness, the way he would rest his hand on her belly at night to feel the baby's movements. As her time grew nearer, Noah insisted on hiring a young woman from a neighboring ranch to help with household duties, ensuring Sarah could rest. "You're coddling me," Sarah protested one afternoon as Noah urged her to put her feet up instead of helping with dinner. "I'm taking care of what's most precious to me," Noah corrected, dropping a kiss on her forehead before returning to the stove. "Besides, I'm not entirely useless in the kitchen." Sarah watched him with a smile, marveling at how naturally they had fallen into this shared life. "Have I told you today that I love you?" Noah turned, surprise and pleasure lighting his features. It was the first time she had said the words so directly. "No, madam, you haven't." "Well, I do," Sarah said simply. "Very much." Noah crossed the room in 3 strides, bending to capture her lips in a kiss that left no doubt of his feelings in return. The baby came 2 weeks later, in the middle of a clear, cold night. Sarah's labor pains began shortly after midnight, and Noah rode out immediately to fetch the midwife from a neighboring ranch. By the time they returned, Sarah's contractions were coming steadily. "First babies often take their time," the midwife, Mrs. Reynolds, assured them both. "Could be many hours yet." But Sarah's child, it seemed, was impatient to meet the world. Just before dawn, after hours of labor that tested Sarah's strength and Noah's nerves, a lusty cry announced the arrival of a healthy baby boy. "Look at him, Mrs. Reynolds said with satisfaction, placing the swaddled infant in Sarah's arms. "Perfect in every way." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she gazed at her son. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Noah stood beside the bed, his own eyes suspiciously bright as he looked at his wife and the newborn. When Sarah held the baby out to him, he hesitated only briefly before taking the small bundle with careful hands. "Support his head, that's right," Mrs. Reynolds instructed. "You're a natural, Mr. Martinez." Noah stared down at the tiny face, overcome with an emotion so profound it stole his breath. "He's amazing," he managed finally, looking at Sarah with wonder. "You're amazing." After Mrs. Reynolds had seen to Sarah's comfort and departed with promises to return the next day, the new family was left alone. Noah sat on the edge of the bed, the baby sleeping peacefully in the crook of his arm. "Have you decided on a name?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded. "Thomas Noah Matthews Martinez." She touched Noah's hand, to honor both his fathers. Noah swallowed hard against the lump in his throat. "It's a fine name, a bit long for such a little fellow, but he'll grow into it." "We could call him Thomas Noah for now," Sarah suggested, "or just Thomas." Noah studied the baby's face, already seeing hints of Sarah in the curve of his tiny mouth. "Thomas," he agreed. "Welcome to the family, son." The first month of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joyful discoveries. Noah proved to be a devoted father, never hesitating to take his turn walking the floor with a fussy infant or changing soiled diapers. Sarah watched him with their son and fell in love all over again, seeing the gentle giant who could calm a colicky baby with the same hands that broke wild horses. They received visits from neighbors bearing gifts and good wishes, and even Mrs. Wilkinson made the journey from town to coo over the baby. No word came from the Matthews family, which both relieved and troubled Sarah. "They're planning something," she confided to Noah one evening as they sat on the porch, Thomas sleeping against her shoulder. "I can feel it." Noah's jaw set. "Let them plan. You're my wife now, and Thomas is legally my son. I've filed the papers with the territorial court." "I know," Sarah sighed. "But James is a lawyer. He knows ways to manipulate the system." Noah took her free hand. "Sarah, I promise you no one will take our son from us. I'll die before I let that happen." The fierce protectiveness in his voice reassured her, and for a time, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps the Matthews family had accepted defeat. Their little family settled into a rhythm, days marked by Thomas's growth and the strengthening bond between husband and wife. Then, just as Thomas turned 3 months old, the letter arrived. Noah brought it from town, his expression grim as he handed the official envelope to Sarah. "It's from the territorial court." With trembling fingers, Sarah broke the seal and read the contents, her face draining of color. "They're petitioning for custody," she whispered, "claiming that our marriage was a sham entered into solely to circumvent their rightful claim to Thomas." Noah took the letter, scanning the legal language with growing anger. "They're demanding a hearing in Albuquerque next week." Sarah clutched Thomas closer, as if someone might snatch him away that very moment. "Noah, what if—" "No," Noah interrupted firmly. "No what-ifs. We'll fight this, Sarah, all the way to the territorial governor if we have to." The day of the hearing dawned clear and cold. They left Thomas with Mrs. Reynolds, neither willing to bring the baby into the courthouse where the Matthews family would be present. Sarah wore her best dress, a dark blue calico with a matching bonnet, while Noah had donned the suit he'd worn for their wedding. The courthouse in Albuquerque was crowded, news of the unusual case having drawn curious onlookers. Sarah felt the weight of judging eyes as she and Noah made their way to the front of the room, where a table had been set up for them. Across the aisle, the Matthews family sat in somber black, presenting the perfect picture of grieving relatives. James nodded to a well-dressed man beside him, their lawyer, Sarah assumed. The territorial judge, a stern-faced man named Hollister, called the court to order. "We're here to hear the petition of George and Eliza Matthews regarding custody of the infant Thomas Matthews, born to Sarah Matthews Martinez, widow of Thomas Matthews S.R. The Matthews family lawyer rose, a portly man with shrewd eyes. "Your Honor, my clients simply wish to ensure their grandson receives the upbringing his father would have wanted. They contend that the hasty marriage of the widow to Mr. Martinez mere months after their son's death, and while she was heavily pregnant, was an arrangement of convenience designed to circumvent their rightful interest in their grandchild's welfare." Judge Hollister turned to Noah and Sarah. "And your response to these allegations?" Noah stood. "Your Honor, we've engaged no fancy lawyer because the truth needs no embellishment. I married Sarah because I love her, and I love the boy I consider my son in every way that matters. The timing of our marriage was hastened by the threats made by the Matthews family to take Sarah's child from her." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Threats? Can you elaborate?" Sarah rose beside Noah, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Shortly before our marriage, James Matthews and 2 other men came to Mr. Martinez's ranch while I was working there as a housekeeper. They told me they intended to take my baby after the birth and make arrangements for me to leave the territory." Murmurs swept through the courtroom. James Matthews leapt to his feet. "That's a lie." Silence. Judge Hollister ordered. "Mrs. Martinez, do you have any witnesses to this encounter?" "Only my husband," Sarah admitted. "But Mrs. Wilkinson from the boarding house can testify that similar threats were made to me while I was staying there after my first husband's death." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Mrs. Wilkinson is a respected member of the community. We will hear from her." He turned to the Matthews family. "Now, the basis of your claim seems to be that the Martinez marriage is one of convenience rather than affection. Yet I see before me a couple who appear devoted to each other and to the child. What evidence do you have to the contrary?" The Matthews lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we have witnesses who can testify that prior to their marriage, Mrs. Martinez was living unchaperoned at Mr. Martinez's ranch, a situation that raises questions about her moral character and fitness as a mother. I employed Mrs. Matthews as a housekeeper when she was struggling to support herself during her pregnancy," Noah interjected, his voice tight with controlled anger. "She had her own room and was treated with nothing but respect in my home." "And yet you married her with suspicious haste," the lawyer countered. "One might reasonably conclude that the marriage was arranged specifically to prevent my clients from asserting their rights." Judge Hollister held up a hand. "I've heard enough of these allegations. Mrs. Martinez, do you and your child want to remain with Mr. Martinez?" "With all my heart, Your Honor," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Noah has been more of a father to Thomas in 3 months than the Matthews family has tried to be. They showed no interest in my welfare after my husband died, only in claiming my child once he was born. And Mr. Martinez, you wish to raise this child as your own, knowing he carries another man's blood." Noah's gaze never wavered. "Thomas is my son in every way that matters, Your Honor. I was there when he drew his first breath, and I intend to be there for every important moment of his life thereafter. Blood is the least of what makes a family." The judge studied them both for a long moment. "I'm not entirely satisfied with the evidence presented by either side. Therefore, I am ordering a 3-month investigation period. During this time, the child will remain with the Martinez family, but court-appointed observers will make regular, unannounced visits to assess the home situation. After 3 months, we will reconvene to make a final determination." He fixed the Matthews family with a stern look. "During this time, you are to have no contact with the Martinez family unless specifically authorized by this court. Is that clear?" Both sides acknowledged the ruling, though the Matthews family looked far from pleased. As the court dismissed, Sarah sagged against Noah in relief. "3 more months," she whispered. "At least we have that." Noah's arm tightened around her waist, "and at the end of it, they'll see what we already know, that Thomas belongs with us." The following weeks brought a parade of court officials to the Martinez ranch, arriving at all hours to observe their family life. Some were perfunctory in their inspections, while others lingered, asking detailed questions about their marriage, their plans for Thomas's future, and their resources. Through it all, Noah and Sarah presented a united front, their genuine love for each other and for Thomas evident in every interaction. The ranch prospered under Noah's careful management, and Sarah's garden flourished, providing ample fresh food for their table. As the 3-month investigation period neared its end, Sarah found herself growing cautiously optimistic. "The last observer actually smiled when she left," she told Noah as they sat at the kitchen table after putting Thomas to bed. "Said we had a fine home." Noah nodded, though concern still shadowed his eyes. "James Matthews was in town yesterday. Didn't approach me, but I saw him talking with Peterson at the general store." Sarah's optimism faltered. "What do you think they're planning?" "I don't know," Noah admitted. "But whatever it is, we'll face it together." He reached across the table to take her hand. "Sarah, no matter what happens in that courtroom next week, I want you to know that these months with you and Thomas have been the happiest of my life." Sarah squeezed his fingers. "They won't take him from us," she said with more conviction than she felt. "They can't." The night before the final hearing, Sarah woke to find Noah's side of the bed empty. Rising quietly to avoid waking Thomas in his nearby cradle, she wrapped a shawl around her nightdress and went in search of her husband. She found him on the porch, staring out into the darkness, his shoulders tense with unspoken worry. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly, joining him at the railing. Noah shook his head. "Too much on my mind." Sarah leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Want to talk about it?" For a long moment, Noah was silent. Then, "I keep thinking about what I'll do if they rule against us tomorrow." A chill that had nothing to do with the night air ran through Sarah. "Noah, we can't think that way." "I have to," he insisted, his voice low and intense. "Because if that judge tells me I have to hand over my son to people who care more about their family name than his happiness, I don't think I can do it." He turned to face her, his expression resolute. "I've been thinking. If things go badly tomorrow, we could leave. Tonight. Head west to California or north to Colorado, somewhere beyond their reach." Sarah stared at him, shocked by the suggestion. "You mean, run to keep our family together?" "Yes." Noah took her hands in his. "I know it would mean leaving everything we've built here, starting over somewhere new. But Sarah, I would rather live in a tent with you and Thomas than in a palace without you." Tears filled Sarah's eyes at the depth of his commitment. "You would give up your ranch, everything you've worked for us." "In a heartbeat," Noah replied without hesitation. "You and Thomas are my home now. Everything else is just things." Sarah threw her arms around him, overwhelmed by the love she felt for this man who had become her world. "I pray it won't come to that, but if it does, yes, we'll go together." They held each other in the moonlight, drawing strength for whatever the morning might bring. The courthouse was even more crowded for the final hearing, the unusual case having become something of a sensation in Albuquerque. Sarah walked in with her head held high, Noah's steady presence beside her giving her courage. The Matthews family sat on the opposite side of the aisle, their expressions confident. James caught Sarah's eye and smiled coldly, a gesture that sent a shiver of apprehension through her. Judge Hollister entered and called the court to order. "I've reviewed the reports from our court observers, as well as additional testimonies submitted by both parties. Is there any new evidence either side wishes to present before I render my decision?" The Matthews lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We have recently obtained information that directly speaks to Mr. Martinez's character and fitness as a guardian for the child." Noah stiffened beside Sarah. "What is he talking about?" he whispered. The lawyer produced a document with a flourish. "Your Honor, we have here affidavits from 2 witnesses who testify that 7 years ago in Colorado, Noah Martinez was involved in a shooting incident that resulted in the death of a young man. He fled the territory before charges could be filed." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Sarah turned to Noah, confusion and fear warring in her expression. "Noah!" Noah had gone pale, his hands clenched into fists on the table before them. "It wasn't like that," he said quietly. The Matthews lawyer continued. "We submit that a man with such a violent history, who fled justice rather than face the consequences of his actions, is not a suitable guardian for a child. The court cannot in good conscience leave young Thomas in the care of a man who may be, in fact, a fugitive." "This is outrageous," Noah said, rising to his feet. "That incident was self-defense, plain and simple. I never fled from justice. There were no charges because the sheriff himself witnessed what happened." Judge Hollister banged his gavel. "Order." Mr. Martinez, you will have your chance to respond. He turned to the lawyer. These are serious allegations. Do you have verification beyond these affidavits? We have telegraphed the authorities in Colorado, the lawyer replied smoothly. We expect confirmation shortly. In the meantime, we ask that the child be placed in the temporary custody of his grandparents for his own safety. Sarah clutched Noah's arm, terror washing over her at the thought of Thomas being taken from them. Noah, what are they talking about? What happened in Colorado? Noah looked at her, anguish clear in his eyes. I'll explain everything, but not here. Judge, he addressed the bench directly, this is a deliberate attempt to bias the court with half-truths and distortions. I request time to obtain documentation that will prove these allegations false. Judge Hollister considered this. Given the serious nature of these claims, I am inclined to grant a continuance. However, I am concerned about the welfare of the child in the interim. Your Honor, the Matthews lawyer interjected, given the uncertainty surrounding Mr. Martinez's past, we believe the prudent course would be to place the child with his biological grandparents until this matter is resolved. No, Sarah cried, unable to contain her distress. Please, Your Honor, don't separate us from our son. Noah would never harm anyone, least of all Thomas. The courtroom had fallen silent, all eyes on the drama unfolding before them. Just as the judge appeared about to speak, the doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Your Honor, I must request to be heard on this matter, came a commanding voice. All heads turned to see an older man in the formal attire of a lawman striding down the aisle. His silver star caught the light as he approached the bench. And you are? Judge Hollister inquired. Sheriff William Donovan, Boulder County, Colorado Territory. The man introduced himself. I've come a long way to set the record straight about Noah Martinez. Murmurs swept through the courtroom. Noah stared at the man in disbelief. Sheriff Donovan. The sheriff nodded to Noah before turning back to the judge. Your Honor, I received a telegram 3 days ago regarding inquiries about a shooting incident involving Noah Martinez some years back. I was surprised to hear his name after so long, and even more surprised at what was being implied about his character. You have personal knowledge of this incident? The judge asked. I should hope so, Donovan replied dryly. I witnessed it myself. He pulled out a document from his coat. I have here my official statement, filed at the time, which clearly indicates that Noah Martinez acted in defense of himself and a young woman when he shot Jasper Blackwood. The Matthews lawyer sputtered. Your Honor, this is highly irregular, so is attempting to paint a man as a murderer when he acted heroically. Sheriff Donovan cut in sharply. Blackwood was a known troublemaker who had attacked a young woman. Martinez intervened, and when Blackwood pulled a knife, Martinez defended himself. The shooting was ruled justified, and far from fleeing, Martinez stayed in Boulder for months afterward, until family matters took him elsewhere. There were never any charges, and there is nothing in his past that should reflect poorly on his character. Judge Hollister took the document, reading it carefully. This appears to be in order. Sheriff, you've come a long way to deliver this information personally. Donovan glanced at Noah. I owed it to the young man. He saved that girl's life at considerable risk to his own. I've seen enough men of true character in my years as sheriff to recognize one when I see him. The Matthews family lawyer was conferring frantically with James, who looked as if he'd been struck. Judge Hollister cleared his throat. In light of this new information, which directly contradicts the allegations made against Mr. Martinez, I am prepared to render my decision on the custody matter today, unless there are objections. The Matthews lawyer attempted to recover. Your Honor, regardless of this one incident, the fact remains that the child is a Matthews by blood. Blood is not the only consideration in matters of a child's welfare, the judge interrupted. Having reviewed all the evidence, including the reports of our court observers, I find no reason to separate the child from the loving home provided by Noah and Sarah Martinez. The petition for custody by George and Eliza Matthews is hereby denied. Sarah let out a sob of relief, turning to bury her face against Noah's chest as he wrapped his arms tightly around her. Furthermore, the judge continued, I find the attempt by the Matthews family to introduce false and misleading information about Mr. Martinez's character to be deeply troubling. Should any further attempts be made to separate this family through deceptive means, this court will view such actions most unfavorably. With a final bang of his gavel, Judge Hollister ended the proceedings. The courtroom erupted in conversation as the Matthews family swiftly departed, their defeat evident in every rigid line of their retreating backs. Sheriff Donovan approached Noah and Sarah. Didn't expect to see you again this side of the Rockies, Martinez. Noah extended his hand, gratitude evident in his face. I can't thank you enough for coming all this way, Sheriff. How did you even know about the hearing? The telegram they sent asking about you raised my suspicions, Donovan explained. Didn't like the wording, so I did some digging, found out what was really happening here. He glanced at Sarah. Looks like you've done well for yourself. Better than I deserve, Noah agreed, his arm still around Sarah's waist. Sheriff, this is my wife, Sarah. Madam, Donovan tipped his hat. You've got yourself a good man there, one of the best I've known. I know, Sarah replied, smiling through her tears. And now everyone else does too. They invited Sheriff Donovan to stay with them for a few days before his return journey, an offer he gladly accepted. That evening, after retrieving Thomas from Mrs. Reynolds and settling him in his cradle, they sat on the porch with the sheriff, the weight of the day's events finally beginning to lift. I still can't believe you came all that way, Noah said, passing Donovan a cup of coffee. The sheriff shrugged. Seemed the right thing to do. Besides, I've been meaning to see more of the territories before I retire. Sarah, who had been quiet since their return, finally asked the question that had been on her mind. Noah never told me about what happened in Colorado. Would you mind telling me the whole story, Sheriff? Donovan glanced at Noah, who nodded. It's all right. She should know. The sheriff set down his coffee. It was the summer of '71. Noah was working at his father's ranch outside Boulder. There was a young woman in town, Rebecca Allen, who caught the eye of Jasper Blackwood, meanest drunk in 3 counties. One night, Blackwood cornered Rebecca behind the saloon. Noah happened to be passing by and heard her screams. Noah took up the narrative, his voice low. I pulled Blackwood off her, told him to go sleep it off, but he was too far gone, pulled a knife and came at me. I had no choice but to draw my pistol. He looked down at his hands. I didn't want to kill him, but it was him or me. The whole town knew Blackwood had it coming, Donovan added. No one blamed Noah. Rebecca's father considered him a hero. He looked at Sarah. Your husband has always been the kind of man who stands up for those who can't defend themselves. That's why I knew these accusations had to be false. Sarah reached for Noah's hand. Why didn't you tell me about this? Noah squeezed her fingers. It wasn't something I was proud of, taking a man's life, even one like Blackwood, and after a while, it just seemed like part of another life. He met her eyes. I should have told you, I'm sorry. No more secrets, Sarah said softly. Not between us. Noah nodded. No more secrets. As the evening deepened into night, a sense of peace settled over the Martinez home. The threat that had hung over them for so long had finally been lifted. Thomas was theirs legally and forever. No one could take him away. Sheriff Donovan departed 2 days later, leaving behind his promise to visit again someday and check on the family he had helped to preserve. Life at the ranch settled into a new rhythm, one unburdened by fear of separation. Thomas grew quickly, a happy, robust child who took his first steps holding onto Noah's fingers and spoke his first word, Papa, to the man who had chosen him as surely as if he had been born of his blood. On the first anniversary of their wedding, Noah surprised Sarah with a small silver locket. Inside was a tiny photograph of the three of them, taken during a trip to Albuquerque. "So you'll always have us close to your heart," he said as he fastened it around her neck. "As if you could ever be anywhere else," Sarah replied, rising on her toes to kiss him. That night, after Thomas was asleep, they sat on the porch swing Noah had built the previous summer, watching the stars emerge in the vast New Mexico sky. Sarah's head rested against Noah's shoulder, his arm a warm weight across her back. "Happy?" Noah asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Completely," Sarah answered without hesitation, "though I've been thinking." Sarah smiled, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach. "Thomas might like a little brother or sister soon." Noah's eyes widened, joy blooming across his features. "Sarah, are you?" "The doctor confirmed it yesterday," she nodded, laughing as Noah pulled her into a jubilant embrace. "We'll welcome another little Martinez around Christmas time." Noah cradled her face in his hands, his eyes shining with love and wonder. "Every day I think I couldn't possibly love you more, and every day you prove me wrong." 7 months later, as winter settled over the New Mexico territory, Sarah gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth Rose Martinez. Noah held her with the same awe he had felt holding Thomas, marveling at the perfect tiny features that somehow combined the best of him and Sarah. As the years passed, their family and their ranch flourished side by side. Thomas grew into a strong, compassionate young man who worked alongside his father with the same quiet determination. Elizabeth, with her mother's chestnut hair and her father's blue eyes, brought music and laughter to their home with her natural talents for singing and storytelling. 2 more children would join them, another son, William, named after Sheriff Donovan, and a second daughter, Grace. The Matthews family never again attempted to interfere with Thomas's upbringing. Though occasionally they would send formal, impersonal gifts on his birthday, items that were acknowledged with equally formal thanks before being tucked away in a trunk. When Thomas was 12, he asked about his biological father, and Sarah and Noah told him the truth, answering his questions with honesty and love. "So my real last name would have been Matthews?" he asked, trying to make sense of this new information. "Your name is Martinez," Noah told him firmly. "Just as you've always been my son, from the moment I first held you." Thomas considered this, then nodded. "I'm glad things happened the way they did. I can't imagine having any other father but you." On the 20th anniversary of the day Noah had saved Sarah from the wild dog, they stood together on their porch, watching their children tending to evening chores around the now prosperous ranch. The years had added silver to Noah's dark hair and fine lines around Sarah's eyes, but the love between them had only deepened with time and shared experience. "Did you ever imagine this?" Sarah asked, gesturing to the life they had built together. "That day when you came upon a pregnant widow being attacked by a wild dog," Noah chuckled, drawing her closer against his side. "Can't say I did. I was just trying to save a woman in trouble." He turned to face her, his expression growing serious. "But looking back, I think I started falling in love with you that very first day, watching how brave you were despite everything." Sarah rested her hand against his weathered cheek. "I think fate brought us together, Noah Martinez. That wild dog led me to the greatest blessing of my life." "Well then," Noah murmured, bending to kiss her with the same tenderness he'd shown on their wedding day, "I suppose we owe that mangy creature a debt of gratitude." As the sun set over the desert horizon, painting the land in gold and crimson, Noah and Sarah stood together, surrounded by the family they had built through choice and love, and courage, a family that had begun with an unlikely encounter and a cowboy's steady aim. A family that would endure generation after generation on the land that had witnessed their beginning. "Back up slow, I've got the shot," Noah had said all those years ago. But it was Sarah who had truly captured something precious that day, a future brighter than she could have imagined, and a love that would last a lifetime.